moving on.
Oh, Israel. God, we're so behind. We got to get
We're
cracking here.
really
Let's
behind.
let's
We're
go.
gonna whip
Israel.
through this because it's bad. Um, Israel continues to be just awful. The latest thing is, what's the latest thing? Oh, I mean, I don't know. There's just one thing after another. The Flour Massacre happened, I think, like the day after our last show, where a whole group of 1.8 million people who are being purposely starved by Israel were finally being allowed to have a few trucks come in, and there's a little bit of pandemonium, and then Israeli snipers just start killing. They killed over 100 people. They killed over 100 people. I think 1,000 were injured. 150 killed, 1,000 injured. And that was on February 28th. So that was the day of our last show. Right away, the IDF says it wasn't them. They put out a video, which I'm sure everybody saw, which was so repellent and, again, Nazi overtones, making the people look like ants. It was black and white, and you just see people sort of running. And then, of course, through further inspection, it becomes clear that the IDF absolutely was shooting at people that they were starving to death who were trying to get aid. And since then, there have been at least 4 more Flour Massacre type attacks. So first, the IDF denies that they would ever do it, just like with the hospital that we all spent time parsing and looking at videos, and they're denying it.
There's no way they bombed that hospital intentionally.
Yeah.
And then now every single hospital has been bombed, and there are effectively no working hospitals now.
Complete collapse. Gaza. Right. So let's see. This was on March 5th. So that was yesterday, was the third one, right? So it was the second attack since last Thursday's, or so it was last Thursday, Flour Massacre. They've had 2 more. Today there was another one. 8 Palestinians have been wounded after Israeli forces fired live rounds at people waiting for humanitarian aid. We have a president and a government that is funding and arming the people who are committing these massacres, while at the same time pretending that we're trying to send in humanitarian aid. But now, because our good friends in the Middle East, the only democracy, Biden can't trust them not to attack the few trucks that he is actually able to get in. Now they're airdropping aid.
They're airdropping, as people have pointed out, it's the paper towel moment with Trump. Like, oh, here's a paper towel thrown out at hurricane, whatever, The amount of food airdropped was like so insignificant to cover the need. And obviously, we pointed out last week, I think
38,000 food packages for 2 million. A lot of it
was spoiled. Yeah, regardless of that, like it's not going to do anything. It's just like Biden saying before Super Tuesday, we're going to have a ceasefire on Monday.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen.
38,000. And also no clean water. And also a lot of it was airdropped into water. So not only are you starving people, which is a war crime, but you're shooting them as they try to get a little bit of expired aid that doesn't even include drinking water, which they don't have because Israel shut off their ability to have clean drinking water. There's like rivers of raw sewage just around Gaza. But now you're airdropping it. So people are running into the water where they don't even have fresh water to then clean off. And it's like, I'm sure it's like lovely to go into the sea when you haven't eaten and haven't had clean water. You can't shower off that salt. Like every part of it is just.
Every part of it is bad. And look, Israel bombed, they shot fishermen in the water, fishermen
in boats, like,
trying to bring back food for the people who are starving. They shot them. So any claims that we can't do anything about this while we're stopping humanitarian aid, while we're allowing Israel to bomb and shoot humanitarian aid and bomb hospitals and bomb schools, like hospitals and ambulances and humanitarian aid is not safe. And so like the PR response from Israel is to put out all these paid kids online, because if you're
Right.
Israeli, they're paying people to push propaganda online. Like they literally admit it. It's out there. It's known.
Yep.
It may not be propaganda to them. They may believe this stuff, but their response is, well, what can Biden do? What Biden can't do anything here. Like that's
Right.
probably a Democratic push in this situation.
No, but I actually
you can't separate, which the U.S. keeps trying to do, separate calling for a ceasefire. Like, what can we do in this situation? It's an ally, and
They're
we're giving
working
them
behind
money.
the scenes.
And you can't detach. Okay, we don't give them money first.
There are
Like,
lots of politics explainers online and on cable news telling us how Biden isn't the president of Israel. What could he do? Which is such a lie. We all know he went around Congress twice to give them more arms. He could pick up the phone the way he did in 2001 and tell Netanyahu to stop. He could not tell his lackeys to go and veto ceasefire resolutions. He even forced, what's the guy's name? I can't remember, to tell the UN that they couldn't, I mean, who cares even, but I mean, it's such like a small thing, but that at the UN, they can't even do a resolution to condemn the Flour Massacre because we haven't investigated yet. And we don't know. We still don't know. Do they know
Biden
about UNRWA?
He's
UNRWA? How
completely
about that?
powerless, but he can bypass Congress to renew spying power.
Right.
He can bypass Congress to get money. He can bypass money to Congress to give weapons, to put a weapons stash that's free and fair. Like, just do what you want with this, Israel. Here's our weapons stash.
Which, by the way, makes, I mean, I know we all know this, but complicit legally, because once
The genocide laws.
right, genocide, war crimes, there's just been an open letter after Aaron Bushnell self-immolated last week, all around the world. People are holding up pictures of him, grateful to him for this extreme act of protest. And I think it's probably helped other people in the military to come forward. A letter that was written saying, this is, war crimes are not political. And genocide is not political. This goes against, and listen, we did plenty of things, and we have, of course, I think the US is probably the biggest terrorist organization in the world. But I think individual service people feel like they want, this is against what they thought that they were signing up for. And the fact that it is so clear, I don't think that's ever happened before, where people are videotaping and sharing on social media their own, the genocide happening to them. And by the way, the IDF, with the Flour Massacre, I mean, there are all these Telegram channels, right, that are IDF soldiers showing how, we're killing them like roaches, like ants. We're getting them to, the hungrier they are, they're going to start cannibalizing each other. And like, they have all people following them.
We can show a million videos of those, and
it's just
every week we pull a couple of them, and it's just like, I know everybody's watching these, so
we've
we're
all
not
seen them. We
sharing
know about them. It's horrifying, but they're advertising their genocide. They are proud of it, and we are still arming them. And still, even with seeing what happens when you airdrop and you can't get aid in, like, why tell your good friend Netanyahu to move the settlers away from, or the protesters who have the bouncy houses, and allow those aid trucks to come in. Like, isn't this our good friend in the Middle East? We can't trust him to allow our aid to come in.
Yeah. So I do want to show a clip of Mehdi Hassan actually on CNN saying something reasonable. I don't know how this got through, but God bless him, and I've had mixed feelings with Mehdi over the years, but I think he's one of the guys trying to work within the system to point some shit out. At the end of the day, he might tell you to vote for Biden, though. So fuck him on that if he
Yeah.
does. But that doesn't make this still impactful to his audience.
Joe Biden has the power to pick up the phone and end this war. He can ring the Israeli prime minister and say, we're cutting you off. We're cutting off aid. We're cutting off armaments. Israelis themselves, Israeli generals say, we can't do this war without America. He hasn't done it. People are starving. A 2-month-old baby called Mahmoud Fatou starved to death earlier this week in Gaza. This is not a natural disaster. This is a man-made famine. Food is plentiful. It's available. It's a few miles away, and yet it's being blocked. In fact, at the Israeli crossing, Abby, I don't know how many CNN viewers know that people are putting up bouncy castles, Israeli protesters, and eating popcorn and candy, cotton candy, and blocking the aid. That is crazy. Joe Biden has rightly said for the last few years that Donald Trump poses an existential threat to our democracy. The idea that he would risk not only his own presidency, but the future of American democracy for the sake of Benjamin Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich and the rest of the fascists in Israel is bizarre and inexplicable to me.
Bingo.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to stop hiding behind those lies. And I'm shocked that they're still letting Mehdi on, but I think it's getting to a point where it's just hard to deny what we're all seeing on our phones, you know.
But I also think, I think part of it is that there are enough people there at CNN even that are just like, we don't agree with this and we know too much. And like, I think it's outliers allowing some of this stuff in because CNN as a network does not want this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think also, you know, like Thomas Friedman just wrote, I mean, you know,
when you lose Thomas Friedman,
when you lose Thomas Friedman, you're really,
holy shit.
Yeah. The whole rape story. I think that is the thing that is really also exposing the complicity of places like the New York Times in using this sort of genocide or this atrocity propaganda to create sympathy for a genocide. And, you know, first it was the October 7th, the Hamas committed rape and it was systematic and a weapon of war and it was written up in November. Meanwhile, by the way, of course, there have been decades of accusations of Israeli soldiers raping and sexually assaulting Palestinian girls, boys, women, men for decades. Yeah. And anytime those claims are investigated and shown to have validity, right away, Israeli politicians say that, well, that organization, you know, the UN, it's anti-Semitic. They won't let the UN in. They would not let the UN in to investigate these rape claims. Instead, as we all saw last week, they had Anat Schwartz write her propaganda piece with her nephew, who I think was a food blogger, a recent graduate of college. Neither one of them had ever had a byline as a journalist before. In the New York Times.
I think the general public is following this a lot closer than CNN wants them to, than the Democratic Party wants them to, than the Republican Party, than the corporate party that running this country.
Right.
They don't want everyone following this that closely.
Yeah.
But what the public knows is that, look, we lived through the Iraq War. We saw this whole thing blow up over. This was a lie from the beginning about yellow cake uranium.
Right.
And it was perpetuated by the New York Times again.
Judith Miller.
They're always front and center in these propaganda things. And they know what's happened and that the New York Times they created this outroar against Palestinian people in general, as if they were all like, the whole country's behind this whole rape agenda. You know, they're all
Nazi, like animals, like barbaric, like it's that whole thing so that it makes it palatable to wholesale massacre them.
This is some evil, like Al-Qaeda kind of level,
right?
You know, these are the evil. This is a terrorist country, not just a group of people that were maybe terrorists,
right?
But the whole country supports this stuff, and so that's justification. If that didn't exist. If that didn't come out from the New York Times, if it wasn't propagated on all the media, CNN, MSNBC, they never could have gotten so much U.S. support initially behind supporting this war.
Right.
And you once you get that support, you have to undo it. You know, if
Yeah.
it's a wrong situation, you have to
Because
undo
there's
it.
that buy-in. People have already bought into feeling like Palestinians are
emotional
animals,
thing
Arabs
is
are animals. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, but psychologically, you're attached to something emotional that's a vivid response, you know?
Well, and even
So,
though like the 40 beheaded babies thing was
right, that's
debunked like
it's
3 days
but it's a
later or something.
strong
Yeah.
visual.
Well,
It's
because Biden keeps talking about it. Yes,
right.
it's strong visual, right. But also like the lie persists even after it's been debunked. The thing with the rape has been debunked. Then they do the second piece. So there was the silent screams from November
Right.
that was debunked. Then there was this article with Anat Schwartz a couple weeks ago that proves it, right? Proves it. Well, she just cited the same sources from the one that was debunked from November. Then that was shown to be like that. Then she was sort of revealed to be just like a documentary filmmaker, not a journalist, had not interviewed any new people. Like basically, they just rehashed the same stuff. They created a new, like the IDSA or whatever the hell for the infectious disease Delta guy for COVID. They created some like sexual assault organization in Israel. So that became the new thing, but it was still the same Zaka lies that they're like the emergency people who come, the head of which, by the way, who started it was a known pedophile and eventually committed suicide, I think. They've lied about the 40 beheaded babies. They lied about the babies in ovens. They lied about the pregnant women having their babies cut out. They've lied about the rapes taking place, so much so that even one of the not compounds, kibbutzes, Barry, the head of that said, no, they're saying that there were people raped here. They were not, those people were not raped. The girl in the black dress, young woman in the black dress, also her family says was not raped. Like it's all been debunked. So now they have a special person from the UN come in, talk to these same Israeli propagandists in Israel to investigate, doesn't talk to any actual witnesses, any survivors, any alleged victims, nothing, listens to them. And now she says, oh, it's credible. But with this caveat, it must be noted that all the information gathered by the mission team was in large part sourced from Israeli national institutions. This is due to the absence of the United Nations entities operating in Israel because they were prohibited, because Israel said the UN was an anti-Semitic agency, as well as the lack of cooperation by the state of Israel with relevant United Nations bodies with an investigative mandate. Nevertheless, we took every step in line with UN methodology. Well, now you've just completely discredited that.
Did you?
To mitigate?
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah. So now the UN comes forward and says, well, there is credible rape. It does look like rape was used. And again, as people have said in the chat, as we've all been saying all along, even if there were some rapes, which there might have been, whether they were by Hamas or not, who knows, not a systematic weapon of war. And even if it were a systematic weapon of war, does not justify a genocide. So like,
which is the entire purpose of that emotional piece, because it allows people to not investigate further. They can just land on that. Their brain is naturally wired to land on the atrocities against these people. So you understand, even if Israel is over responding, well, that thing hits a core of my brain that's just like, holy fuck, that's evil. These are evil people. That was an evil act, you know? So it just glosses over. It causes people to not investigate further and accept something, because if you want to pick a team, and in the U.S. everything's about picking a team,
right? You
got to be on Team Israel. You got to be on Team Palestine. And shit, what they did to Israel on 10/7 was so vile that I'm stuck on that team, and that's how our politics and news media works.
Yeah, and so obviously that shows that was not, and I know we really have to wrap this up, but Zai Squirrel has done such great work on this. I want to know who this person is, because I've been following this account for years, but like truly this has been incredible investigative reporting and like really piecing everything together. But now that the UN comes out with this sort of like fake, sanctioning of the report about widespread rape, the same nephew who was a food blogger before he wrote this, propaganda piece is now using that UN new information, which it's not, but new report, to now say Israel says vindication in UN's report. I mean, it is just, once again, like it's the same group of people laundering each piece of information and then citing each other back to each other.
Yeah, and there's no accountability for, of all media outlets, the New York Times is unaccountable for this. So we have to get people to unsubscribe. Like, they need to pay the price to this. Like, people within the New York Times.
The one thing they're doing is looking into all of their Arab American and Muslim American writers to try to find out who leaked this. That's what they're looking at.
That's exactly. They're doing the opposite. And the obvious thing about the UN is, like, the UN was started by the US to, when the UN people themselves kind of want to investigate this stuff, and we're not letting our own institution who wants to investigate this stuff, and just blanket believing Israel on all of it.
Yeah, it's not. And as somebody said, I think Mr. Jesco, and thank you, Oz. Thank you. Just because if I don't do this now and I see how late we are, I will forget. And thank you to Reflect the Sun. You guys are all amazing. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Sorry. Pat and I are now doing the same buttons together. Okay, wait. I'm going to not push anything.
On this part of it. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Amazing. Sorry. Now I totally forgot. Why did I do that? Sorry. Too many shots, Pat.
But
the rape.
Okay, Israel, we've got a long time to talk about this. We could go into it forever, but just to hit some of the atrocities, they're literally testing those robot dogs we keep hearing about in Israel right now. We've got them appropriating all this land illegally.
Oh my God. And they're selling it from the US.
Yeah.
Like at temples in the US, they are selling, it is illegal. They're only selling it to Jewish people. Stolen land. It's like two different crimes.
All right. So it's hard to end this topic on something positive, but kudos to The Weeknd. First singer and celebrity to donate $2.5 million to humanitarian aid in Gaza. This was like 2 weeks ago.
4 million meals.
5 days
the
ago.
U.S. government, what'd you say?
I thought this was 2 weeks ago, but no, it was just 5 days ago, apparently.
Well, I don't know when he actually did, but but he's donating 4 million meals. The U.S. government did 38,000, which was basically just a trap to then, I don't know how this is getting to them. I don't know exactly how it works, but like, how is it possible that the U.S. government gave 38,000 meals to 2 million people who are starving? Anyway, one thing, and I know this is controversial to some people, but I really think it bears repeating. Norman Finkelstein, right after 10/7, sort of came out in praise of Hamas as a liberation movement. And he said, yeah, there were atrocities and that's horrific, but this was a political expression. You cannot keep people in cages and not expect them to fight for their freedom. And I do think it is interesting who is termed a terrorist. The UN, and now, of course, I'm not going to be able to find it, and I wanted to have his exact wording. But anyway, the UN does not consider Hamas a terrorist organization. They consider them. Why can't I find my files?
I'll hunt for it while you go.
They consider them.
Say something important.
A liberation movement. And I think it's really. Listen, no civilians deserve to be murdered. There's so many questions about exactly what happened on 10/7 and who caused which deaths. But I also think, looking at the history of Israel and how it has treated Palestinians for 75 years, what do you expect is going to happen? And even now, you know, when they say we've got to finish the job, we've got to get rid of Hamas, you're never getting rid of Hamas through military action. If
There's
you
no
want
such
people not to, want to kill you, then you have to give them dignity and rights to the freedoms that we all enjoy or should enjoy.
Yeah, it's fucked. But you know,
Thank
what
you
can we
for
do?
the
We
super
can
sticker, Daniel.
support all the aid calls we can. Call your congressmen, call your congresswomen, write the senators, raise hell, get in front of any public speaking event you can. Be as proudly pro-Palestine as you possibly can, anywhere you can.
And do not give these monsters a second of peace. I love, maybe we will just, boycott.
Boycott the shit out of these companies supporting them. I mean, there's, Starbucks is taking a big financial hit. It's actually impacting their bottom line. McDonald's, the same thing. They've both those groups have come out publicly saying that the Israeli war is costing them money. The war is costing Israel money a lot. So,
that's right. I think they've taken a 20% constriction in their GDP.
Yeah. So, I mean, financially, we need to hurt them. That's all that matters to politicians, countries, anything.
Yeah.
It's money. Make it about the money.